Joining us now for more context and analysis is constitutional law professor for Cardozo Law School, Deborah Pearlstein. Deborah, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
First off, anyone who watched last night would have an opinion on what happened. What were your thoughts on the hearing last night? Do you feel it was compelling enough to make any kind of leeway?
So I think it depends on which audience you're asking about. To the extent that the committee is aiming to speak directly to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, it began to lay out a remarkably clear and specific case that there might be criminal liability for the president here. A lot of the evidence that they introduced went to the question of what the president knew, what the president's intention was, whether his purpose was corrupt or not. The evidence suggesting that the president knew the election was lost, he knew his claims were false, goes to the question of what his purpose was, and that's an essential element of proving any criminal offense. To the extent the audience here are other members of Congress, I think they've begun to make the case, right? There are important ongoing elements of election subversion efforts that the committee is worried about.
There are elements of a trial here. There are witnesses, questions being asked, but it's not a trial. So what happens if Congress does prove any sort of corrupt intent or conspiracy to defraud the United States? What happens next? They go to the Justice Department? What is their job here?
So all Congress has here with respect to criminal charges is the power to persuade. Congress has no power to conduct any trials. It has no power to bring any prosecutions. The only power it has with respect to criminal liability is to try to urge or put pressure on the Department of Justice to the extent it can to pursue criminal prosecution of its own. Ultimately, that decision is up to the Attorney General.
Following this, and I'm sure you have as well, you know, people have gone to prison. They've been charged in a similar way, similar evidence laid out. Is there a different bar for evidence here when you're going after the President of the United States, which it seems like from the onset of last night's hearing, they did? Is there a different bar because he's former president?
So the requirements for making out a criminal charge are the same, whether the defendant is the former president or whether the defendant is somebody off the street. The challenges here are a couple. One is the need to prove intent, the former president's state of mind. And while you can do that through different kinds of indirect evidence, that's a hard bar to pass in any case, no matter who the defendant is.
I know you focus on facts, you focus on the law. From a constitutional perspective, how big a hit do you think it is for our democracy that something like January 6th has become so political?
So from my own point of view, right, studying not only U.S. constitutional democracy, but constitutional democracies around the world, what we see in the United States, including most disturbingly on January 6th, are the kinds of events we worry about acutely when we look at foreign governments and worry about whether the country is sliding away from democracy and into some other form of government. That's when I watched the events of January 6th unfold, when I watched the politicization surrounding those events today. That's what I worry about most, that we no longer have a common perception of how constitutional democracy works, how it's supposed to work, and when we have crossed an indisputably not only illegal, but politically unacceptable line.
Right, and those who study how democracies end, that's usually one of the ways, one of the red flags. So, of course, everybody's going to be paying attention to that. I'm wondering what you're going to be paying attention to as these hearings move forward, particularly the next hearing on Monday.
So I think the committee made clear that it is going to address and going to describe a multi-pronged conspiracy. There were efforts to interfere with the outcome of the election at the federal level, at the state level through state legislatures and election administrators, and through a public disinformation campaign that the committee suggested last night is itself responsible for the violence. My expectation is that they'll start with the federal level. The efforts to get the Department of Justice, the efforts by the president to get the Department of Justice to interfere with its own investigation into election fraud, the efforts to get Mike Pence, the vice president, to take action on January 6th that the former president knew to be unlawful. And I expect we'll hear from former Department of Justice officials, members of the former vice president's staff, who can help shed direct light on what the former president's role was in those efforts.
Constitutional law professor Deborah Pearlstein, thank you so much for taking the time and your insight tonight.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.